Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our first Ask Her of 2023. My name is Sarah Weatherby, and I am the Director of Communications for Washington Area Women's Foundation. For those of you that are new to the foundation, we are a community-supported organization that invests in the power of women and girls of color in the Washington, D.C. region. We do our work through grant making and advocacy, and we, along with our partners, are intentional about centering the voices and lived experiences of women and girls of color to influence policymakers and philanthropy as it relates to gender and racial equality. If you are moved by today's conversation, we encourage you to share your experience on social media using hashtag AskHerSeries, and feel free throughout the conversation to submit any questions you have for our panelists via the Q&A box on your screen, or you may also submit them in the chat. Today's Ask Her is a special one. As you know, this month continues the official year-long celebration of the Women's Foundation's 25th anniversary. And what better way to usher in this momentous occasion than to have joining us today a few of many women who have played a huge role in the success of the Women's Foundation. Now, I won't give away too much of what is to come, but I can say that you are in for a treat today. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our moderator and interim president and CEO of the Women's Foundation, Lendsey. Jackie has more than 25 years experience leading national and local nonprofit organizations. Since 2012, she has served as an interim executive professional, skilled at guiding organizations through transition in a limited time frame. She's a native Washingtonian and life member of Delta Sigma Theta Incorporated and Leadership Greater Washington. Welcome, Jackie.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It's an honor to be here to talk with those women, you as women leaders that I'll be introducing in a few minutes, who helped us get started as a foundation more than 25 years ago, who are the essence of the Washington Area Women's Foundation and continue to support us. You know, author Kate Hodges once said, "Behind every great woman is another great woman." And that is true of the Washington Area Women's Foundation. And so today I'm excited to have joining with us four of the many great women of our organization who some time ago rose to the occasion as change makers to lead a movement that would inspire, empower, and transform the lives of women and girls in our community for an equitable and resilient future. Now, before we begin with the question, I think it's important to introduce you and share a little bit with you about each of these women. So today with us, Marion Ballard. Marion is a founding mother and former board chair of the Women's Foundation. During her career, she spent many years as president of Data Plus, a software development company in Washington, D.C. Prior to her role at Data Plus, she served as the vice president of FinPac Corporation, a nationwide provider of equipment financing for business owners, and as a mathematician for UNIVAC as part of Sperry Corporation, which specialized in computer equipment. Prior to that, Marion spent time lecturing at Temple University in Philadelphia. She, in addition to her impressive business career, is also a supporter of the community. She served as the secretary of the board for Sidwell Friends School, chairman of the board for the Sandy Spring Friends School, and on the board of directors of Planned Parenthood of Metropolitan Washington, D.C., Levine Music, and the Friends Committee on National Legislation. Marion, we're honored to have you with us today.
I can't believe you found all that stuff out about me.
We can find everything when we need to. You know, it's all, and you.
There's actually one thing that I do that I really enjoy doing. It relates a little bit to what we're doing here. I'm on the board, a founding board member of a school in Tanzania for girls. It's a boarding school. And we take the girls from about 8th to 11th grade, but we follow them for the rest of their lives for getting their A-levels and then university and then a career and training, whatever they do. We have funds to support them each level. It's a wonderful organization.
So, I mean, it just continues your fantastic support of women and girls, not only in the Washington region, but also internationally. And that's what happens with the Women's Foundation. So thank you,
There
Marion.
you go.
Welcome. And as to your question, where did I find all that information? Well, as a computer person, a former data person, you know it's always out there. It never goes away. So now I'd like to welcome Dr. Vivian Pinn, who's also a founding mother of the Women's Foundation. Early in her career, she became the only African American and the only woman in her class to graduate from the University of Virginia School of Medicine. I need to say that again. She became the only African American and the only woman in her class to graduate from the University of Virginia School of Medicine. Shortly afterwards, she became chair of the Department of Pathology at Howard University College of Medicine, making her the first African-American woman to chair an academic pathology department in the United States. And she later became the first full-time director of the Office of Research on Women's Health at the National Institutes of Health. So a lot of firsts for Dr. Vivian Pinn. Today, Dr. Pinn currently serves as Senior Scientist Emerita at the NIH Fogarty International System. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Pinn.
Thank you, Jackie. Looking forward to the discussion.
And then I'd like to introduce Rachel Kronowitz, another amazing woman. Rachel is a former board chair of the Women's Foundation and founding partner of the law firm Gilbert LLP. She was honored by the Washington Business Journal as a woman who means business, and I know, Rachel, she does mean business, and by Business Insurance as a woman to watch. She was also named as Best of the Best by Expert Guides as one of the 30 best insurance and reinsurance practitioners in the world. Rachel currently serves as board chair for Leadership Greater Washington. Welcome, Rachel.
Thank you, Jackie.
And then I'd like to welcome our fourth panelist, Dr. Lynn McNair. She's current board co-chair of the Women's Foundation, and she brings 25 years of experience in the nonprofit world, setting strategy, developing fiscal capacity, and establishing partnerships and foundations with individuals to enhance philanthropic giving. Most recently, she served as Chief Development Officer for Georgetown Day School, and prior to that, she served as the Vice President of Philanthropic Partnerships for the Alliance for Excellent Education, a national policy and advocacy organization working to ensure that at-risk middle and high school students receive the support they need to meet the challenging academic standards of today. She's also served in leadership roles both nationally and internationally at the Internet Society, the Salzburg Global Seminar, the American Association of University Women, and the National Governors Association. So I want to welcome Marion, Vivian, Rachel, and Lynn to today's conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So our first question is for one that each of you can answer. Each of you has a unique story on how you became acquainted with the Women's Foundation. I'd love for us to go back in time. When did you first learn about the Women's Foundation, and what motivation got you involved?
Well, I'll start. Back 25 years ago, I was director of the Office of Research on Women's Health at the NIH and was interested in women and girls and their well-being. And Lois Slavkin happened to be at the NIH because her husband was the director of the Dental Institute, and she was interested in what our office was doing for women. And one day she came to visit me and said she had this idea because she knew about a women's foundation on the West Coast, and she thought that we should start one here in Washington. And I thought, oh no, not another group, not another meeting. And she persisted and said, you know, this could really be good because we can teach women about the value of philanthropy and we can reach out to the community. And I'm still a little hesitant, but she brought together a small, fantastic group of women, and the idea blossomed. And I thought, how can I say no to this? So it really was that beginning idea from Lois that sort of infected me, if you will. And then seeing the group of women who came together, all excited about the idea, not only of making women in this area recognize the value of being philanthropists, but also expanding our horizons and doing things for women. And we expanded to women and girls and putting a focus on populations of color. I was hooked, and that was my introduction, and I was all in.
Another really important person in that first effort was Joan Barham, who came with her husband from
Yes.
the West Coast also. I think he was with Apple. And Lois and Joan were key to our startup efforts.
Any one of the others of you, when did you first learn and what motivated you to get involved?
I'll share. I'm happy to
ahead.
share. Thank you, Rachel. I first got acquainted with the foundation because of none other than Marion Ballard. Marion called me. Marion, I don't know if you remember this. I was on the Hill at the time working for the National Governors Association, and you guys had decided that you needed a founding CEO president. And you were really looking around and casting a wide net to a lot of folks. And you asked me if I would consider putting my name in the hopper. And
How good of me.
I don't know anything about this. I am a reluctant feminist. How in heaven's name could I be on anybody's list for anything related to women? Well, I had a wonderful year-long relationship with Marion, getting to know her, getting to know the foundation, and then getting to know Ann Mosley, who was ultimately selected to be the CEO of the foundation. I pulled out of the process because at that time my husband was ill and I had 2 small children, and I just couldn't do it and manage my personal life at the same time. But Marion, thanks to you, whether you remember or not, I am here because of you.
I remember.
Lynn, I'm here in part because of Marion too. I was first introduced to the foundation by my dear friend Catherine Borsnick, who was an early board member. And I had been talking to her one evening. My law firm was about 5 or 6 years old at that point, and how I had been working so hard on the legal side and the professional side of my work. And I was jealous of my husband, who was a DC public school teacher, who was doing so much of God's work in the community. And I felt like I hadn't really had the opportunity to do work in my community. And my friend Catherine said to me, "Oh, I've got the organization for you." And she invited me to an event that Marion Ballard hosted, where each board member was supposed to bring 2 friends to learn a little bit from grantees. I was completely hooked. I wrote a big check on the spot. And the next thing I knew, I was being recruited for the board, and I was able to, as Catherine rolled off, I was able to take Catherine's seat, and I have never looked back.
Well, so it sounds like all great stories of how you got to the Women's Foundation. And Marion, you sound like the catalyst in the middle of all of that. I have to say,
I didn't know it at the time.
but I can remember back when the foundation was starting, having a conversation with you myself, Marion, about the Women's Foundation. And so each of us has a connection to the other, not only through Marion, but through all the kinds of things we've done over the years that have still brought us back to the Washington Area Women's Foundation. So let me ask Vivian and Marion, especially as 2 of our founding mothers, and as women who were around in that first group present during the early formation of the foundation, can you talk a little bit more about the why? Why a women's foundation? Why was it needed at that time?
Well, I'll let Marion take it up, but I'll just say that what brought me in and the reason I saw this as something that was needed and that I was willing to give my time to was really the thought that in this Washington area, and we started with Washington and expanded to consider the whole Washington metropolitan area, Virginia and Maryland, in our decisions, but there were so many needy programs and needy individuals that needed to be helped. And the idea of getting women to understand more about being involved in philanthropy. So I just think those concepts came about, and there was nothing really to encourage women to be involved in philanthropy that was a well-recognized entity at that time. And of course, looking at and being involved in women and knowing the health needs and the community needs and the mental health needs of women and girls taking across the spectrum. The value of an organization like this just seemed appropriate and something worth giving time to. And the excitement, I think, really came from all the women as we came together, picking up on those ideas and seeing this is not something we can let go. We've got an idea here. Let's go with it. Marion, you might want to comment further on that, but that was what inspired me, and seeing that we didn't have anything like that here in Washington. That was all encompassing.
You verbalized it very well. I think when you go to a women's college, you're very conscious about opportunities for women.
Which I
And
did.
so that was part of it. I've always cared about women being treated equally with men and letting women have opportunities. And that's that was part of it. Creating, giving women opportunities to improve their lives and get ahead and get educated and be able to do the things they wanted to do. We hadn't proved it then, but we've now proved that women can do everything a man can do and more, because we raise families as well. And they're coming into that, but not so much. Anyway, we've done very well. I think that the Bill Clinton's horrible action in his second term, when he made it mandatory that women get work in order to get assistance, also made it more imperative that we form an organization to help the women who were struggling so much with life and wanting them to be able to get their education and not have to work.
You know, and thank you, each of you, for those great answers. Over the 25 years of the foundation, we've had many programs and many ways in which not just women, but businesses and other funders can support women and girls in this region. And we've even, as the COVID came along, realized that we needed to also bring our mission down to more specifically working with women and girls of color in this region. So over that 25 years, a lot of things have happened to each of you. We've made great strides then over 25 years. Is there a significant event or accomplishment that you're most proud of as founding women, founding leaders in the Washington Area Women's Foundation?
I'll just say, I remember when we had our earliest meetings and there were just a group of us, sometimes in my office, sometimes Lois's home. We were finding places to meet and hoping we would raise enough money to be able to support some program. And what was it, Marion? Maybe 25,000 was sort of like our first award. When I come into the luncheons or the gatherings now of the foundation, I'm just awestruck seeing the involvement, the excitement, the men and women who are there and who are excited, seeing the thank yous and the genuine appreciation of those groups that are supported by grants from the Women's Foundation. I just sit there feeling, I haven't done that much. I was there at the beginning and stuck with the foundation, but I just sit there with such great pride that these women who really had this idea and took it forward have just brought about a whole new entity that we can all be so proud of. I just sit there with pride. I'm sure there are specific programs that others might want to identify, but to me, it's the whole shebang, if you will, just seeing how it has grown from that small clique of women to now just ballrooms full of people and others wanting to be part of it.
The reason we were meeting in Vivian's office is that she was so busy that the only way we could see her is if we went to her. It was a real coup to have you involved in it.
Well, picking up on what Vivian said, I would say that the accomplishment that was most significant for me over this 25 years is the establishment of the African American Women's Giving Circle. Jane Fox Johnson, me, and Ruth Goins came together, and Ruth at the time was at the Mott Foundation out in Michigan. We all came together and decided this is in part Ann Mosley's brainchild, but it was also, I won't take away from the grouping of women that came together to put it in play, because we really felt that we had an opportunity to impact our community in a way that we had not done in previous years. So what we did was we came together and raised $100,000 over a 2-year period. And when I hear you talk about the $25,000, we were so excited about this $100,000. And we kept saying, we did it, we did it, we did it. And just an incredible number of women that came together through our networks to help us do that, and to really provide support in the community, and especially in the communities east of the river in Anacostia and elsewhere, and really getting to know those nonprofits that were on the ground doing some incredible work and being able to make contributions to them. So that is like so close to my heart, and really, really got me even more engaged with the Women's Foundation.
Rachel, anything that stands out for you as when you look at an event or an accomplishment over the 25 years?
So Jackie, what really stands out to me are our luncheons. The annual luncheon grew to be an event that people in our community really felt like they had to show up for. They needed to be there, and the fact that we were able to lift up the power of women coming together and providing philanthropic support for organizations who were doing work for our neighbors in our own backyards, and doing it in a way, in a collaborative and strategic and thoughtful way, focusing on 2-generational assistance and really educating people while we actually could bring our community together, was for me a really joyous occasion, and was the hallmark of the Women's Foundation for so many years. And I know so many people who looked forward to that event every year, and often only saw their friends there once a year then, but that was such a pleasure for them.
And those
Let me
bags,
read-
don't forget the bags.
The hobo
The
bag.
bags, I mean, the whole thing, Lynn, it was great. And the way people, I mean, everyone you had to dress just right,
Yes.
the whole thing,
Right.
the step and repeat, all of it, right?
I want to read an email that I just found. I didn't bring much with me to my retirement community. It had to be top stuff to come. But here's an email dated Tuesday, October 9th, 2007. And it's addressed to 50 people. Luncheon committee email. We've reached an all-time high of $760,000. And we have 1,525 people signed up to come to the luncheon.
Yeah.
It's truly amazing.
That's
thanks.
amazing, Marion.
How we've grown
Isn't that
since then.
amazing?
Yeah,
1,500
that
people.
really is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
$750,000. Wow.
Yes.
Having attended those luncheons and being excited about being one of the winners of the hobo bag at the table, but
Wow.
but it wasn't just that. It was what you've all talked about in terms of and the African American Women's Giving Circle and other accomplishments that the foundation has had over the 25 years is that notion of, again, behind every great woman is another great woman, and bringing those women together for the purpose of supporting women and girls in this community. And I think the accomplishments that you've just mentioned are those kinds of gatherings, larger accomplishments that are so important and were so important to the foundation to do the work that has happened over the last couple of years. So if I could pivot from the accomplishments and the last 25 years and talk to Lynn and Rachel very specifically about the work of our organization. Currently, our core programs are around early care and education, our Young Women's Initiative that centers on the voices of young women and girls of color, gender expansive individuals, and our safety and violence prevention programs. Can you talk a little bit about the priorities of the Women's Foundation, how those priorities have evolved since its inception and since your involvement with the organization? And is there anything that stood out as a focal point for you for that work or for the work that's currently being done? Long question, but I think you get it.
Rachel?
Lynn, go ahead, Lynn.
Okay. You know, it's an interesting question. I actually don't think the priorities have changed. I think the priorities continue to be on women and girls, period, writ large. And that's what makes it such a powerful institution. What has happened over the years is that we've gotten, for lack of a better word, a bit more granular, a bit more focused on women and girls of color. And that has been significant. We continue to see that women and girls of color in our region are far behind their counterparts, white women. And we think it's important that we do things that lift up that community as much as possible. I think that's really, really important. But I also think that you know, we still have a ways to go, and we still have lots of work that we need to do. The fact that we've pivoted to women and girls of color is absolutely essential in this time, in this decade, if you will, for however long it takes us to do what we need to do. I still think that we need to make sure that we bring every woman into the fold as much as possible. I think the focal point is repositioning the center so that we're focusing on women and girls of color, which is really, really important. I also think that what was really important back then is that that's really different than what we do right now, but I anticipate that we will continue to go back and reflect on our roots and bring those things back into the fold. And that is the research that we commissioned. And or we're actively involved in. And I also think the advocacy work, while we may not have been as vocal as some institutions which have advocacy at the core, we were still part of that community. And I think that's where we want to sort of move back into the space and get more targeted around the advocacy and the research space, which informs the work that we do and informs the community.
Lynn, I love hearing about that, and I love hearing about what the board is involved with today. I had the great honor of serving on the Women's Foundation board with Lynn a long time ago on her first board tour, and with Marion as well. And I learned so much when I was on the board. It was as I mentioned earlier, it was really my first opportunity to get involved in the community in this sort of way. And I feel in so many ways that the Women's Foundation has given so much to me, the community that I was able to develop by being on the board and by being involved in it was huge. But the things, Jackie, that I think about that I was incredibly proud of that we did way back when I was on the board was both the Early Care and Education Collaborative, the idea of bringing a collaborative like that together, and the way it's evolved over the years and focused both on the children, but on the ways in which early care and education are provided and supporting the women who actually, since it is almost completely women, who actually provide the care and education, and thinking about that to me was really important. And then the focus on women and girls of color. I was incredibly proud when the Women's Foundation sharpened its focus on women and girls of color. That to me was exactly the right work to be doing at this time, in this moment, especially through COVID. And from my perspective, the fact that the Women's Foundation stepped out and made that very clear helped me really recognize the incredible importance of the organization to the work that we do in our community, all of us outside of the Women's Foundation as well. And so I am really grateful, Jackie, to you and to the other board members, and you, Lynn, and the other board members today who are shepherding that work through.
I think you both talk about the kinds of programming that has grown over the years as a result of what started 25 years ago, and how it has deepened and widened throughout this community. I think you mentioned, Vivian, that it was first Washington, D.C., and now we're in Prince George's, Montgomery, and Northern Virginia, along with the district. Lynn, you talked about advocacy as a big piece of what you look forward to us continuing to do. And Rachel mentioned the Early Care and Education Collaborative, which is celebrating in 2023 its 15th year as a collaborative, but also celebrating its work quietly as an advocate for early care and education, working with our grantees and other supporters that led to actually legislation in the district last year that increases the wages of early care and education workers. So if you think about the work of the foundation and you think about the efforts that you all put in 25 years ago and then continue to put in, those kinds of, that involvement has made a difference in this community. And it's some of the current work that's going on, like our Young Women's Initiative, where we're building that next generation of advocates and building that next generation of young Black women entrepreneurs through the Rock Stars. So all of those are great ways of looking at how the foundation has been able to increase its impact in the community. For all of you, this is a question that each of you can respond to. You've been involved with the Women's Foundation at an early point in your career. How important is it to have more women, especially younger women and women of color, be involved with the Women's Foundation? And then I'm going to ask you that other question, what about men? But first, how important is it to have younger women, more women, and women of color involved?
Briefly, extremely important for our future,
Yes.
because that's the younger generation will have different ideas because society is changing through the different generations, but having them recognize the value of what we're doing and assume the leadership as some of us who've been around begin to fade out. I just think the bottom line is, you know, we could say a lot of things, but the bottom line is it's extremely important that we continue to expand and bring in to grow, bringing in the younger generation, bringing in more diversity, which your foundation has been doing wonderfully, because that's where our future lies.
What Vivian said.
I agree, totally. But 25 years is a generation, so
Yes.
we're all gone. We've been around for 25 years. We should get out of the way. We need new people to come up who can start their 25-year term with the Women's Foundation.
Yeah.
And men are helpful sometimes too.
Well, +1 to everything everyone said. I totally agree. I think, bringing in the diversity, Hispanics or Latinx, Asian Americans, African Americans, more white women. And also, I just think as diverse as we can get it is really reflective of the region, reflective of where the country is, and reflective of where the world is. And I think that is absolutely essential. I think the other thing is that if we're talking about sustainability, like Marion said, we've got to move out of the way. We can stay in our space in some ways, but we've got to make room for those young voices that can help sustain the foundation and help it grow beyond where it is right now. And so +1 to everything everyone else said. And hey, the door is wide open.
And interestingly enough, the other part of the question is not just younger women and other women of color, but the other part of the question is men. We always talk about the men who get it, or that was the phrase we had used back in the day, the men who get it. And Marion's husband, Rick, was an ally and a longtime supporter of the Women's Foundation prior to his passing. And his contributions helped shape the foundation, helped shape the organization. What role do you see men having as board members, donors, and even allies? And before you answer that question, I do want to let the folks know who are joining us in our audience that there will be time for you to ask questions also. So what role do you see men having as board members, donors, and even allies?
Well, access to funds is one major use. If they're on corporate boards, bring in a contribution from the corporation, please.
I mean, I found Jackie, when I was on the board and board chair, Alex Orfinger joined the board at my request at that point. We were very dear friends, and it was a time of real change for the Women's Foundation, because lots of national foundations had changed their view about contributing to an organization like a public foundation like the Women's Foundation, that they considered a middle person, as opposed to doing the direct work themselves. And so it was a time of real fundamental change for the organization. And Alex he agreed not only to join us on the board, but also to lead our development effort. And at that time, that was really important because he was sort of walking his talk. He led the Women Who Mean Business program at the Washington Business Journal. And I said, show us in the philanthropic world. And I see that we now have other men who have rotated through the board and have walked that talk as well in a really serious way. And there is real value from my perspective to our community in doing that.
What would you say?
I'm sorry, I agree. I think having men at the table just elevates their own understanding of the challenges that women go through and the challenges that they can help turn around and affect change. And so having them there, not only as resources for generating revenue and bringing revenue into the institution, but also in terms of their own networks that may or may not understand this women's issue, if you will. And rather than make it a women's problem, it becomes a world problem, and it becomes all of our problem or all of our concern. And I think that's really, really where we hit a sweet spot by engaging men.
I want to second what Lynn said. I think that is the essence of why there should be involvement, and I really support what you just said. I just say ditto.
Thank you.
Strongly ditto.
Thank you.
Another part of this question was younger women. All of you, we were all younger when we first became a part of the Women's Foundation. What would you say to younger women in our audience today, or younger women in general, about why it's important to become a part of the Washington Area Women's Foundation?
It's really tough because they're now all working very hard and achieving big things in their career, in addition to raising their families. So finding somebody who can, in addition, squeeze in the time and commitment it takes to be seriously involved in the Women's Foundation is challenging.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I would say the joy that younger women would have in being part of this organization and learning more about this community and meeting women across this region, bringing them into their networks, having those lifelines and connections is absolutely worth whatever time you need to do to squeeze out of everything else you have responsibility for. The joy that being part of this network has brought to me is immeasurable. And the way it has changed and enriched my life is extraordinary. And I believe that younger women would have that same opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. I like what you just said, Rachel, because I've been sitting here thinking all along. We're talking about how the foundation has benefited the community and what we've done. But I've also been thinking how for each of us involved, and for one of the reasons I think we can use to encourage younger women to be involved is that it has broadened all of our perspectives. I wouldn't have known Marion if it had not been for this foundation. Those women that we met with early on, I still hear from many of them. And, we see each other and it's like, family coming together. And I think each of us has a personal benefit from just being involved and expanding our horizons in terms of people that we know. So I think that's a benefit that I personally have gotten. And I think it's something that we should be able to stress. You know, just the wealth of women from different backgrounds, different areas that are involved in the foundation, having a chance to learn from them, getting to know them, and then just expanding your horizons. So there's a personal benefit as well as a benefit to the community of being part of this.
Yes.
So, you know, we want to make sure that we give some time for other questions. So I've got a last question, so to speak, for you, and it has two parts. How do you envision the next 25 years of the Women's Foundation in terms of what you'd like to see accomplished? And then what would you like your legacy to be?
What a great question.
Um,
You know, I think if I had to envision, I mean, I've been thinking about this a lot, and I like to think years ahead of where I am. And I'd like to see this foundation to be at least $15 to $20 million operating with a robust legacy program or plan giving program, as some people may call it, and a robust endowment program. I'd also like to see robust participation from women of all sectors, of all sizes, styles, et cetera, in this region, participating in the foundation, whether it's through some program or some volunteer work or what it might, or whatever it might be. And then I'd also like to see men at the table. And that doesn't mean seasoned men only. It means young men who are our future as well. How do we engage them in this process? And then I think the final thing would be, I'd like to see us more engaged around the research piece, and as we were in the past, and much more robust around the advocacy work as we used to be. And I guess my legacy would be, how do we become world renowned? How do we become one of those foundations, because we sit in the nation's capital, that we are not only known locally, but we're known nationally, and in some respects, we're known internationally. How do we move that needle to become that kind of foundation where folks are calling on us for advice and guidance? That's where I am.
Wow. Anyone else?
I think she said it all.
I agree with Lynn. I mean, I
Yeah,
really,
that was good, Lynn.
that was
Just going back
beautiful.
to the research part is something that I had wanted to say something about. I remember when Anne first started it, she wanted to get a picture of the landscape. I didn't even know what that meant. It was
Yeah.
a picture of the landscape, and she hired all these people. I don't know how she got the people to do the research. I just saw the finished product and maybe could proofread it or something. But Jeff Zienst and Mary Zienst from the Urban Institute were involved with getting the statistics right. And now Jeff, of course, is going to be the second in command, chief of staff at the White House, right?
Yeah.
So we did
Didn't
good
know
in
that.
getting him involved in doing the research. But that product, that the finished product, not only was informative for our audience, but was very instrumental in getting grants.
Yes.
It was a big way to fundraise from foundations. And Anne did it on a regular basis, it seems, or the foundation did.
Yeah.
It was a good anchor for going out to fundraise. Very important.
Right.
The portrait project.
Yeah, I think you're talking about the portrait project. We've got
Thanks, Sylvia Berry.
a number of people in the audience
That's a name from the
Right.
past.
for reminding us.
Exactly.
They're reminding us. So it's time to get some questions from the audience, and I know there are a few. So Sarah, do you want to give us a few questions from the audience?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So the first question, ladies, when you think about the spirit of the Women's Foundation, what 3 words come to mind? And anyone
The
can
spirit.
Yeah, when you think about the essence of the Women's Foundation, what 3 words, just any 3 words that come to mind when you think about the Women's Foundation?
Compassion, caring, and I'm trying to think of another C word to say, action.
That's good.
but caring and compassion, and I guess and taking action to alleviate. I don't. Okay, I'm lost. I was trying to come up with 3
Commitment,
words.
does commitment work? It's not as good as
Commitment.
caring.
Mhm.
Commitment sounds good.
Yeah, I think of aspirational, inspirational, and
Ah.
fun. We had fun.
Fun.
Oh, I like that too.
Yes,
Accomplishment. Women, accomplished women
yes,
accomplishing things.
yes.
That's 4 words.
That's okay.
Anybody else? All right, another question that came through: why should people donate to the Women's Foundation instead of to the organizations that it works with directly?
Well, you might need to do both. I think, if you're working closely with an organization and one that you've supported over the years, you continue to do that, but you then maybe look to see if you can pull up a few more dollars to put into, if a few people put in a few dollars, it ends up being a big dollar amount. And so by contributing to something like the foundation like we have, it allows all those donations to come together to really accomplish much more in terms of funding ability than just individual small donations. But I don't think we're asking anyone to stop giving to those organizations they already support. That would be my thought.
I like to think that in addition to giving money to individual organizations, we have a public voice which reaches out to the whole metropolitan area with a message about the status of women and in Washington, in the Washington area, because it's the DMV, not just Washington, but we have a communication network that is more effective than any one organization can have.
I think that's right, Marion. And I also, I am completely persuaded by the collaborative impact of the work that the Women's Foundation does. By taking the funds that the Women's Foundation has at its disposal and really focusing funding on work that the foundation has determined is where the dollars are needed is, from my perspective, incredibly valuable to our community.
And +1 to everyone, everything everyone else has said. I think it also heightens the or builds the networks, not just the networks that one organization might have, but exposure to a breadth of networks that allows the impact to be even greater than one institution might have in its own community. And it's a benefit to that one institution to be a part of that bigger network.
Speaking of visibility, I saw a question in the chat I want to maybe throw to Lynn and Jackie. We've been through the pandemic. Is there a possibility of bringing back those luncheons that we've had? Although the last one, you had so many people, the ballroom was full. No one else could even get in. But to me, bringing visibility to some of those that we fund, those young people who performed or given poems or sung, brings visibility to them, to the programs that are there. And I have just seen people, once they come to the luncheon, I think, as we have talked about earlier, are so impressed that they become willing participants. So I hope that maybe we could go back to the luncheons, even if we have to move to a stadium to facilitate everything.
What a treasure. The short answer is we would love to bring back the luncheons, Vivian. I think the pandemic threw us off our game, but things are opening up and people are feeling much more confident in terms of how they deal with COVID and how the responses should be across institutions. But the luncheon was our hallmark, and to bring that back would be just such a big thing for this community. One, for all of us that have been a part of this institution for the first 25 years, but just think of those young people who have no clue what we're talking about, and the joy and the fun and the excitement of being in a room with women like you or women you don't
Yep.
you're not like, and just bringing all that melting pot together. Oh gosh, it would be wonderful. So I think the hope is that we can do that, Vivian, and do it in a way that would be mindful of what our climate is right now.
Fantastic.
I didn't say we were gonna.
At least you're gonna consider it. You're considering.
We are, this is our trajectory. This is what we want to do.
Yeah, I think, thank you, Lynn, for saying that. I think we are looking at a number of ways to celebrate our 25th year and a number of ways to culminate that celebration around the time that the luncheon was usually held in October. But we're also mindful of the environment that we still tend to be in terms of large gatherings. So we're trying to figure out the best way to be able to do that. But it is certainly something that we are thinking of in our 25th year as a celebration. And I would also say that it is something to look forward to as we move past our 25th year, as we look at what we want to do going forward. For those of you who are in the audience, we had a tea in late November with all our founders and our former chairs, and the energy in the room was electric. The notion that you couldn't walk through the door without being swarmed by other women who wanted to talk about their accomplishments and the work that they've done and the friendships that they developed and the excitement in the room. So if we're looking to do anything in celebration in 2020, in our 25th year, we're looking to do that kind of celebration where we can bring together that excitement that ultimately leads to getting back to that kind of big event that was so important to us in years past. Sarah, any other questions?
No other questions have come through.
Well, you know, this has just been an exciting opportunity and a great time to continue talking about the work of the Washington Area Women's Foundation, the Women's Foundation, with 4 exciting leaders, founding mothers, former board chairs, current board co-chairs, women in this community who represent what we're talking about in terms of becoming philanthropists and learning how to use that philanthropy knowledge to expand opportunity for, especially now, women and girls of color in our region. So, you know, if nothing else, it's thanks to the 4 of you for making the foundation what it became over 25 years and still being with us to carry us through to the next 25 years and encouraging that next generation of women to join us. This has been an absolute joy to have this conversation with you. For those of you who are with us in the audience, this conversation is being recorded and it'll be up on YouTube, and we'll send out information for others who might want to see this conversation and think about how they can become involved with the Washington Area Women's Foundation. So before I close, any last comment, statement, thought from any of you?
Jackie, I actually just want to express real gratitude to you, to Lynn McNair, to Lori Weinstein, and the current board for leading this organization, and the staff for leading this organization through the pandemic, these last couple of difficult years, and through another change in leadership. I have every expectation that the Women's Foundation is going to come out a stronger organization after all this, and I'm incredibly grateful to y'all for taking the time in such a thoughtful, strategic way to take good care of this wonderful organization. So thank y'all.
So
Well said.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Rachel,
well
for
said,
saying well
Rebecca.
said.
Thank you. So I started out with that quote that behind every great woman is another great woman. And you've seen that reflected here today with Vivian Pinn, with Marion Ballard, with Lynn McNair and Rachel Kronowitz. And they are only exemplars of the rest of the Women's Foundation and the many, many women, hundreds of women who've been involved with the foundation, who continues to support the foundation, both through their own activity and their own financial wherewithal over the last 25 years, and we hope for the next 25 years. I want to thank all of you who joined us today. I want to invite you to go to our website, to subscribe to our communications, our newsletter. I want you to make sure that you're seeing us on social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. We want to we're not on TikTok yet, but you never know. We might get the 4 of you to do a TikTok so we can get out there. But we are on all forms of social media, and all of that to say that what we want to make sure people understand is the programming and the grant making and the philanthropy that we bring to the Washington metropolitan region, again, in Prince George's County, Montgomery County, Northern Virginia, and the District of Columbia, for women and girls of color at this moment in time, and hopefully for the next 25 years. So I invite you, and I believe that you'll see in the chat a link to go to our website, and to go to our page that highlights ways that you can support the foundation, and the ways that you can give the foundation. And I hope and invite each one of you to do that, to help support us to continue this work, help support us to continue to be able to give grants to support the work of our grantee partners who are working with young women of color, who are working in the area of safety and sexual and domestic violence, and who are certainly working in the area of early care and education to support not only the workers, but to grow that next generation of young people who will become the next leaders of the Washington Area Women's Foundation. So again, I thank the 4 of you for being with us today. I thank everyone who's been in the audience for joining us. I was seeing what was in the chat. I saw those comments, Phyllis Caldwell, so we know you're out there. And some of the others. So I want to thank you for being with us today. And we will come back next month with another Ask Her that will focus on young women. We've got some exciting guests that we think you'll be happy and pleased to see talking about the work they're doing as young women in our community. So again, thank you, everyone. And again, this is our 25th year, standing together for 25 years and standing together for 25 years more. And with that, thank you, ladies, and good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.